All right. Thank you. Um, okay, so the I'm gonna give you like even a little bit more of a break right now because the 15th, I have graduation in the morning and we have a little now celebration with our first cohort of students who 7 of them are graduating on Saturday from year one. I know, pretty good conversion rate there. I'm not, and then I have to drive home to Pennsylvania. So truthfully, I am not going to be home to Pennsylvania until about 8 o'clock on Saturday night. If you want to get your stuff to me by 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, I will still make it work. Okay? But if you don't have it to me by then, you're getting it incomplete. You're going to have to deal with it. Okay? Because if I'm giving you the 15th anyway, which I already told you I would, I'm not going to grade it after I'm over at whatever hotel people are staying in and they have a little room set aside at 8 o'clock at night. I'm not going to be grading it at 10:30 at night when I get home. Not when I have to be at graduation at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then I have to drive. So if you want to get it to me by 8 o'clock-ish Sunday morning, that gives you until the 17th to have it to me. You definitely will not have feedback. I will read your paper. I will score it with the kind of checklist that I have of the things that I need to have. Make notes to myself, and you will get feedback sometime over Christmas, but I can take it till then. So that gives you even a little bit more leeway for a couple of you that were struggling to get finished and having, you know, life as a whole going crazy right now on you. The next thing to tell you is the preliminary exam stuff is within the folder. I am waiting on the official email to send you all the email that says it's all there. We have a worded one that we've used the last 3 years for it. Basically, I put everything into the IIP folder that I could remember that we said in the email, and copied the text over from the course where we had the shelf. This is an individual exam. Once you start the exam, you are expected to not share the prompt, and you are expected to not share your answers, your interpretation of what the prompt must say. Okay? It is built in there as a 3-hour exam window. I gave you 185 minutes to give you a moment or two in case you panicked at the end and need to like save it before you whatever. You have until we come back in January to finish this. It's built into the course for this week as your final, but you can do it until January 6th, I think it is. That Sunday night at midnight is when the test is open till. If it's going to be later than that, you need to let us know and we will figure out what to do about it. But that should give you a good 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks to find a 3-hour block of time to do it. You are going to take your articles that are in there. There are 2 articles in there. You can open the folder, you can look in the folder, get the 2 articles, and then the prompt is kind of sealed. Once you open it, you have 3 hours to do it, and then it shuts and you're locked out. If you open it and accidentally, you either write stuff or you email me right away and we try to get you another prompt. You will have other articles to read and other prep work to do then. Okay? The Etmer article, and I think it's a Dubay article that are in there, you will read them. You will annotate. You will write yourself summaries. You'll identify themes. You will, you know, kind of come up with your own ideas of how they relate to each other or not. You're going to pick them apart using the skills and the strategies that you have learned in all of your classes to this point. You'll look at the literature review. You're going to look at the methods. You're going to look at all of these pieces and try and imagine what we might ask you about them. You'll be given a prompt. When you click on the test to open it, you'll be given a prompt and you write for 3 hours. Okay? This is a progress check. We expect to have decent work. We expect to have a decent paper. If you do not score above the median level for it, then we will have a discussion with you. You'll get some more articles and you have another chance to write again in January. All right? So this is a make or break moment, but it is not supposed to be, you know, pull every single hair that you have left in your head after this semester out of your head and, you know, try and, you know, drown your sorrows in sparkling water or something like that, okay? You're okay. It's going to be all right. Almost every one of you is a really good writer, okay? You're going to be all right with it. You're going to prep your stuff. You're going to go in. You're going to think about it. You're going to write your stuff. And you're going to be good. Don't blow it off. If you turn this in something that's like 2.5 paragraphs, that's probably not a good thing. 2 pages, 2.5 pages, especially if it's good stuff, you know, you're going to be fine. It doesn't have to be an 8-page paper in 3 hours. We just need to see that your ideas are there, that you can answer the prompt, that you can use the skills that you have already learned to do this. Okay? So that's what the prelim exam is. So the exam is really a paper. And your articles are there. You have time to prep. You pick your 3 hours. Even if it is, you know, January 6th at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night and you have your 3 hours there, you're ready to go, and that's when you do it, that is fine. Okay? 2 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Eve, that is fine. It's your choice. If you want nothing to do over Christmas, then do it this week. If you want time to think about it, save it till you have a good spot. If you have any questions, you can ask me about that. I cannot discuss the prompt or any other preparation other than what I've just said with you, but you are welcome to ask me questions other than that you might have. Okay. With that, do you have any questions about what you need to turn into me? The IRB that you turn into me is a draft. I'm going to give you feedback on it. I'm going to say, really, this is what goes here. This will be your advisor piece. This will be here, and so on. Your advisor will be your PI. You will be the co-PI, and you'll just fill in the other pieces as you see fit. Okay? It'll copy paste pretty much out of your paper. It should not be a whole lot of new writing. You can base it off of the one that I have listed and the pieces that I have listed, and you can copy paste some of your stuff out of there as well. So if you're using video, you can copy my stuff and put it in there. When it comes to the ethical piece of it, you copy it and paste it over if it makes sense for your study. Some of you have de-identified data and things like that you're going to be using maybe in the future. You know, that's another ball of wax, and we can work through that whenever you get to that point. Meaning like quantitative data that you downloaded from things. This is just kind of a draft, so you've seen the IRB and you have an idea what it looks like whenever you come rolling into it, either with your IIP next semester or with your dissertation in the future. Other than that, you have a paper that gets turned into me. Your paper has lots of little pieces, especially in the appendice. You can make them into Google Docs and give me links. I am fine with that as long as I can access them. I prefer editable links so that if I have comments to make you, I don't have to try and remember what I was saying and go back and then put it in. But I know some of you like clean copies. I won't type in your text. I'll leave comments, I promise. I know some people are really like heebie-jeebied by people typing in their paper. So I did that wrong. That's why I lost my first advisee. She was like really bothered by that. All right. If you go to find your stuff for it, let me share. Okay, to find your stuff for it, if you come to the class on the side, it says Prelim Exam Cohort 4. That's new. And here are your 2 articles. They should look familiar. Anybody remember seeing them before? Yeah. Okay, so then here's the prelim. You click on the links above for the access to the articles. When you're ready, block out 3 hours. You can't, once you start, you have to do it. You know, it's like being on the roller coaster. Once you get over that hill, there's no stop until you're done. Okay. Technical difficulty, screenshot it, email me. If you have an error message, contact the help desk. All of those things kind of like give us information that we'll give you another rewrite for. We're going to believe you that you have it, but if you have those things, it's good. You have until 6/19 at 11:59 p.m. to do it. You need to have 3 hours or less. Maybe you can write a lot faster. You can't read it and then leave and then come back and do it. If you click on this That's going to take you into the test. It will have a window for you. I'm going to double check that and make sure before I click on it that I'm not showing you the prompt and like getting in trouble. Yeah, okay. So even if you click on there, on that link, the link takes you to something that looks like this. Tells you once again, don't discuss it, you have this amount of time, here's your 3 hours, whatever. Click begin. You'll click begin, give you the prompt, and then you start to write. I suggest writing it in a Google Doc or writing it in a Word document. Do not type it into the window because the Windows sometimes crashes. Okay? I would really like it. I would recommend very strongly that you type it on a Word document or in a Google Doc. Okay, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. In my opinion, a Word document is a little more stable. In case your internet would crash, you would still have that. Okay? It's up to you though. I do not want it as a Drive or a Google link when you're done. You can submit the link and then email me your paper if that's, if you're writing it in a Google Doc and you're at 183 minutes, you can send me the link and send me the paper then afterwards through your email. But we need the actual document because we have found occasionally that they get closed off and we can't get access to them. We've had people change email addresses and we didn't have access to them, a year later. And I mean, we never had it happen but because you can check version history, but theoretically you could go back in and edit, and we don't want to have any problem with the Higher Learning Commission in case that would happen. In case that would happen, the only one that they happen to pull would be that one. So I would like a document with it and not just the link. But if you are writing it in a Google Doc and you want to send the link there and then email it to me immediately after, then that's fine. There should not be there shouldn't be a lapse time though, because the 3 hours is to keep it fair. All right, any questions on the prelim? Okie dokie. That's where you find your 2 articles as well. All right, so tonight is really to see if you have any problems, any help that you need to get finished up with it, and then I just want you to share out your research. Talk about the really, really cool stuff that you had and you've done and what you found, and answer any questions that you have going forward with it. So, do you have any questions? We answered a lot last week. Who wants to start? This doesn't have to be finished. I know some of you said you're still writing till the 15th. These are the 2 really cool things that I found. All right, Michelle's going to start. Go ahead. Okay, Michelle, we're having a small problem with your sound. You sound a little like Alvin and the Chipmunks. I don't know if you can stop it and start it again, maybe, or, okay. So we'll see Michelle in another moment here. Much as I like Alvin. Yeah. Okay, so who wants to start while she's going back and restarting? All right, John's gonna go. Unmute. There we go.
Okay, great, okay. Yes, well, my topic for this paper was towards e-government learning, importing or exporting agricultural services online. And my research question was, how can a government officer teach citizens to import or export agricultural services online? Very straightforward. And I did a comprehensive review of the literature, and these are the overarching themes that was derived through the literature, and that was the E-Government Act of 2002, e-government services, e-government training, e-government and adult literacy, e-government and technology, e-government learning, e-government curriculum using UDL, and then I put together a conceptual framework from the literature. And then for my methods, I did qualitative research. I interviewed 5 program directors within APHIS. I am part of the APHIS management team, so I did observations during the management meetings. We also have a ton of documents in SharePoint, So I reviewed all of the different documents and I tried to connect all of the major themes for the qualitative document analysis. And thanks to, I had trouble putting all of this data together. Then I had a conversation with Dr. Weeble and she allowed me to do the 5 Ws and H. So I put the data into the 5 Ws, who, what, when, and where, and then the how. And then the how was a thematic analysis. And what I did with the thematic analysis, I coded the data into the 4 different interviews, and I also coded the data into observations and observation and document analysis. And then I came up with all of this data and I synthesized all of the data using the 5 UDL principles. And that's how I answered the research question. So the 5 phases of my research question was e-agriculture curriculum shall be expressive, engaging, action-oriented, representative, and technology-based. And I found this project to be very interesting because I am putting together a statements of objectives for our enterprise architecture training. So I'm using a lot of the different concepts that I basically work or develop through this paper. And the data is limited to the US government, and I do recommend future research during a quantitative, qualitative, quantitative mixed methods study, as well as a longitudinal study to see if the data will work. And that's my paper in a nutshell.
Anybody have any questions for John? I thought his analysis was really interesting because he basically coded it twice. Instead of, yeah, he basically did 2 passes at it because he took it and he chunked it into the different research questions by person, and then he went through that and he coded it out by the different areas and themes that he was looking for. So it ended up being like 2 or 3 coding passes on it whenever he was putting it all together to get it distilled down to those 5 pieces. So I thought it was a really interesting method that I hadn't seen before, and probably more work than you really had to do, but to get to your answer. But if that's how it makes sense in your head, there's not a wrong way. That was not a wrong way to do it. It was just how you had to kind of parcel the data out to make it make sense to you. So it was good work because there's a lot of data. I think a lot of you said last week you ended up with a lot of data, even from the little tiny study that you did. All right, if there's no other questions, I think Michelle's back. We're going to try again, Michelle?
Yeah, is that better? Or no? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So I did my research on the impact on health from participants in a CPR class. The 2 research questions that I was looking at are how does taking a CPR course impact participants' health, and how effective is CPR instruction from someone that is not healthy. So I was just trying to get an idea of if it changes people's habits, if they're if they're concerned about their health after they take a CPR class, or if they're not concerned. And I guess the biggest thing that I found from my interview was my aha moment was this last question that I asked on if participants felt like more or less emphasis should be placed on lasting ways to improve your CPR in the course. And none of them did. None of my interviews felt like it's a CPR class. It's for CPR. It's not for health. Your health is in a different class or something. So I guess that was kind of interesting. Like, I just thought that wouldn't happen, but I just used interviews and I did video observations on YouTube, and took my documents from the manuals, the student manual and the instructor manuals. So yeah.
Anyone have any questions on that? I found it really interesting when Michelle and I were talking that she said that people were like, no, it didn't have any impact on my health.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll take a CPR class and talk about people dying and it has no impact on my health. So I thought it would too, but the people that she had talked to did not really agree with that. So that makes it really interesting. Did you find that your coding scheme kind of stayed the same from when you started to when you finished, or did you end up changing it a lot as you went through?
I think it pretty much stayed the same. Yeah, I think it stayed the same.
Yeah. Okay, so we had one that we really had to revamp. We have one that stayed pretty true to the codes that were determined ahead of time to look at that. Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Okay, who wants to talk now?
I can go. My study was a qualitative analysis of online discussions' impact on students' motivation. And for my framework, I used Hergberg's motivation hygiene theory. Is everyone familiar with that theory? If not, it's fair enough. If not, it started in the business world as a way to explore and to discuss motivation in the workplace, but it's since been transitioned in quite a few studies in education, especially higher education. The basic theory says that there's two separate motivating factors, motivators and hygiene factors. Hygiene is in maintenance. So motivators can only increase motivation, where hygiene factors can, if their motivators are present, they can increase motivation. If they're not present, they don't have an effect on motivation, and vice versa. Hygiene factors, if they're present, they don't have an impact, but when they're absent, they will have a negative impact. So my two questions is, what motivating factors impact students' perceived motivation, and which are the most prevalent and impactful? And then vice versa, what hygiene factors impacted students' motivation and how prevalent they were? So what I did is I went into a discussion board in an online classroom. I did more of a case study, and I picked a discussion out of Module 4 and out of Module 7 and coded those by the different factors throughout the discussion. So I was looking for student recognition, I was looking for personal engagement, growth, peer relationships, instructor feedback, pulling from different studies that have used this before in traditional classroom settings. And what I found, and then afterwards I interviewed students, which gave a really nice dialogue behind the data I was seeing. So the two main takeaways I found was motivating factors appeared nearly 5 times as often as hygiene factors. But hygiene factors comprise the vast majority of student complaints during the interview process. Motivating factors actually doubled between modules 4 and 7, and in the initial responses, and because I coded by initial responses and replies to other students' posts. So they doubled in both initial responses and posts between the two modules. Likewise, personal engagement occurred more times in responses to students, but there were more responses happening. So it was actually twice as high of an occurrence in a per post ratio, that students were sharing more, they were more engaged in their original post than in the response to their peers. And in the interviews, this was confirmed with 80% of students describing peer responses as a polite interaction with little substance. So it aligns well with the findings that peer research is rich in peer recognition, but low in engagement. And students were over twice as likely to share personal experiences or engage in the material in a personal way in their initial post than following up with a peer. So.
Very nice work. I like the fact that some of you have been concentrating on the interviews as your primary source of data, and the other pieces are your pieces that you're triangulating it out. And then Ryan's is kind of different in that his was primarily the discussion forum, and then the interviews and the other pieces kind of add substance to what he was finding there. So you can kind of see the different facets of how, and different layers of how qualitative work can actually kind of play out with it, in that it does not have so much, you know, it's not you run your descriptive data and then you run your t-tests and then you run your correlations and all of that. It's not necessarily as prescribed. It's more of an individual or per question way of manipulating your data in order to look at the factors that you feel are most impactful with your research questions. Okay, then I think, any questions for Ryan? Okay, I think Corinne had her hand up next whenever Ryan started. So if she wants to go ahead and talk, that's great.
Sure. Okay. I'm sure that, sorry for my voice. I'm sick, so I'll do the best I can. If you can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I sound like a man, so I apologize. So my topic was about teachers using social media for their own professional learning. And in my lit review, I focused on some themes that were identified based on traditional models of professional development and teachers' perceived effectiveness of those, the design of effective professional development, and then how teachers are kind of going towards social media to take control of their own professional learning, and then their perception of the impact of their use of social media on their practice. So those are kind of the themes from my literature review. I based my study in a couple of different frameworks, so social constructivism, a connected learning framework. They kind of all blend together, like a learning ecology. And I kind of set up my code book in those sections. So I have like a section for social constructivism on how teachers may have responded, and then a section for learning ecology and how teachers might have responded, and then a section on specifically social constructivism without the connected learning piece. And I found that, well, through the data collection, I did a Twitter chat, which I just got some numbers on, and I had, I think, 21 participants, and 7 of the 21 were from out of district. The rest were in district. So a third were out of district, 2/3 were in district. So those are just people I kind of bribed to, let's go, come on, join in. And they did. And so that was exciting because I expected like 2 or 3 people to join in. So that was good. And then after the Twitter chat, I did an interview. I did 3 interviews, 2 one-on-one interviews and 1 group interview. And I had several teachers, classroom teachers. I had an instructional coach, and I also had a student teacher. So that was kind of interesting to get her perspective because she's younger than the rest of us, and she's more engulfed in social media. It's her life. And then I followed that up with a reflection document, and I had 10 responses to my reflection document. And so I used the data when I went through and coded everything. I used my initial a priori, did I say that right, codes. What I was finding as I was coding was I was breaking it down further. And then I went back through and then combined them again. So I don't know if that makes sense, but when I started very general with very general codes. And then as I was coding, I got much more specific. So for example, I had the code of connection. So I was looking for any type of mention of making connection to other teachers, other professionals, anybody else. And then I found myself coding for like local connections versus global connections. And then I ended up grouping that back together again. So I kind of, John, I feel your pain. I kind of like went through it twice. And I don't know if it was I think it was beneficial for me to be able to talk about the data, to do that, to kind of break it down and then group them back together. And I also found I was able to connect it back to the literature on kind of knowledge construction versus knowledge sharing. So I was able to connect it back to the literature by grouping them back together. So if that makes sense, I feel like I'm talking in circles. I think the interesting things I found, or the kind of things that were mostly in line with my expectations, were many people discussed connections, whether it was on the Twitter chat or in the interview and in their reflection. So that data triangulated. They mentioned going to social media for ideas or inspiration, which impacts their instructional practice. So kind of going back to that knowledge construction piece. And then at the same time, the knowledge sharing piece. So they would share their ideas as well. And then what I was surprised was that nobody really mentioned that they went to social media because they were like discontent with traditional PD, which is my percept. Like that's kind of how I started this whole idea of going and looking at professional development. And so I was surprised that nobody really mentioned that. They did mention things like, oh, it's nice to see real life examples or something or a teaching strategy done with real students. So they mentioned that, so I was able to connect it that way. But nobody just flat out said traditional PD is not beneficial or traditional sit and get PD does not apply to me. So I was interested. That was interesting to me. And then the other surprise, which I don't really know why it was a surprise, it shouldn't be a surprise, and it should have been in my a priori code book, was accessibility. Like it's just there. And I can't tell you how many stated that they're already on social media and it's just accessible and it's there and it's at their fingertips. So I don't know why I didn't have that in the beginning, because like looking back, obviously it's at their fingertips. So those were kind of my ahas, my takeaways. I started with way too much data and then cut some out. So yeah, that's my study in a nutshell.
Anybody have questions for Corinne? Okay, so I want to show you again. There's a different type of study design here. She designed an experience where they participated in a chat and then talked to them afterwards and had the reflection afterwards. So this was more of a designed experience rather than taking data where they took a class and you're looking at it. You have a discussion board and you looked at it. You have a project people are working on and you talk about their perceptions of it. All of these still fit as a qualitative research study, but this one happened to be much more of a designed experience where you're figuring out what you're going to have them do and then talk across it or talk about it, examine it from the other side of it, which is also something that you can do in all of your fields as you work forward if this is where you want to go with it. And I think it is really important to note that you did take your codes, broke them down into a much more finer grained analysis, and then put them back together as an overarching theme. As you go forward, you may want to be interested in looking at, do the local connections or the global connections have more of an impact? And so this is an example of how you could break it down. So your coding scheme may actually pull across to your IIP or your dissertation as you decide where you want to look and where you want to focus. So keep these in mind. You maybe won't use any of this for your dissertation or your IIP, but on the other hand, you may take a piece that you had, just that little small piece even, and fine tune it next semester whenever you work on your independent research project. You also know how much data this whole thing generated for you and how long it took you to code and to put it together. So you know when they tell you pick a small area to study, you have a much better understanding of how much that might actually be and what it might look like, and the kind of levels of data that you can generate from these questions in these pieces. So yeah, you guys are riding your bikes well. Who's next?
I'm happy to go. I'd like to share my screen though. Would that be all right? Okay, let's see. Are we good? Okay. All right. So because I work with teacher education, I wanted to look to see how some of our graduates were doing in integrating technology. The research said they would not be doing very well. And in fact, I was going to limit my research to take a look at all the barriers they were going to experience. And then Jen said, maybe you should look at something a little bigger than that. Maybe you won't find as many barriers as you think. And so sure enough, I didn't. But part of the picture is that as a teacher prep program, we need to be sure we're preparing the new teachers in the best way possible so that they can be strong when they head out there. So I did interviews with 3 of our graduates, and I observed in their classrooms, either by video or going to one of the classrooms, and then I collected documents from them. 3 young ladies, all brand new, and these are the questions that I asked them. Where did you learn to do tech? What's at your school? What tools do you use? Have you had any prizes, any supports? Because the research says that they would not have good support, they would not have good tools, they would be afraid, and that's what I expected to find, actually. But I used a couple frameworks that said this. First of all, one of the frameworks said they will be using tech, if they use it at all, for instruction prep, for delivery, and as a learning tool. And the other framework, of course, is the Triple E, the Engage, Enhance, Extend. But back to this first one, I found that they were using technology for many, many things, for all 3 of those. It's a learning tool, delivery, apps that you recognize for sure, maybe some new things, not sure about that. And then you can see just by the sheer number of entries here, they were very comfortable in using technology to engage. They used it quite a bit to enhance, but almost no extending. That's the more sophisticated use of technology, and I know that they hadn't been trained to do that. If they learned it at all, they would have learned it in student teaching. All right, a couple surprises were these. I found that they were very willing learners. I thought that was good, even though in our prep program, the technology piece is young. We've only had an ed tech class for 2 years. Before that, I don't know where, this is just my 3rd year there, so I don't know where any teachers learn to use technology, but that ed tech class is having an impact already. The students heading into their new jobs felt that they were pretty tech savvy already and that they could figure it out on their own, which they did. The most surprising part is that they were leaders in their fields. Not only were they, well, the text said that the literature review said that they would not be comfortable. They would be afraid of what the students would do if they couldn't work their technology very well, that they wouldn't have good support. None of that was true. They all had good support. Only one of them even wanted the support. The rest of them, the other 2, felt that they could figure things out on their own just fine. And they all shared with their colleagues everything that they knew. The one girl who's an adjunct professor at a college right now doing College Writing 1 says that the other English majors who are working there doing that same course that she's doing, they just don't know anything about technology. They don't know how to run anything, nothing about Google Classroom, hadn't done Blackboard, none of that. And so she is just every day teaching them what to do. And the other 2 have had their opportunities to teach. One of them is behind the other 2, which I expected. She didn't even really want to do the interview. She was afraid she'd come off looking bad, but she really didn't look bad at all. She was definitely a learner, and she says, by next year, I got you. Whoever is new next year, she's going to be helping them. So I learned from them what I already knew, that student teaching is the most important training piece. That's already in the literature review. What was a surprise is that they were leaders already, but that they need to be trained to go deeper with technology, not just engage and enhance, but to learn to extend it. So I've already begun with the juniors that I'm working with right now and the seniors, helping them to do these things. So for further considerations, I've already been looking into how other researchers define confidence and competence, and I realized that our students think, our graduates think of themselves as confident and competent, but they may not be as competent as they think they are. And so I can look at that in the future. Also, what tools they use and in what ways, how their colleagues perceive their use of technology. If they use a rubric, they haven't been taught to use a rubric, but they will be now. In fact, I just handed one out last week. And then all of this boils down to, how can I guide our faculty team to do research better and to share things with the graduates? Okay.
Very nice. That was good. So with yours, did you really change your coding scheme that you went into it with?
I didn't change it, but I did add to it. because I didn't expect the learners and leaders part.
Yeah. So that's an example of going in with an a priori framework that you're modifying, adding more codes to it as you're going through, with the emerging themes and kind of areas that you're seeing, and being able to kind of examine your data and, you know, have the flexibility to kind of go with that. Now, the methodology that you're using is still a basic quantitative study, or qualitative study, I'm sorry. In the future, the way that you've designed this, it's lining up with the case study approach, because you have your 3 people that you were looking at and then you talked across. But for right now, all of you can really kind of leave it as a basic qualitative study. You don't have to dip into whether it's like phenomenology or whether it's a narrative or whether it's ethnography or anything like that, even though different ones have different ways that it could work for any of them. Miriam and Tisdale do lay out a basic qualitative study, research study as a methodology, and you can always cite them as you're going forward. And if you want to be more specific, then you can read up in Cresswell and talk with your advisor to kind of target which one you're going to be working with more if you end up looking, you know, at the culture of the school that supports them using social media, or you're looking at the culture of the program where they have the technology integration. That would be more ethnography. If you're looking at the lived experience of someone who has participated in this discussion board, then you're looking more at phenomenology. Or you're looking at, you know, somebody's story about being a part of something, then you're looking at a narrative. So those methods, those approaches that we have not really talked a whole lot about, we just kind of skimmed over, are things that you can flesh out as you start looking at your questions and what you want to examine. So we'll be coming back to that. All right. Who wants to go next?
I'm probably the only one left.
Well, Adam's hopping off the
Oh
bus.
yeah, Adam's still there. I'll go.
No, Adam's hopping off the bus, but I think I have his link in my email to share.
All right. Should I go?
Yep, you go, and Adam will see
All
you
right.
later so we can talk while you're on.